I want to make sure you know something. Programming is not hard, but some people tend to make it hard because they think that programming is all about remembering as much code as possible. And that is wrong. Programming is knowing how a programming language works and knowing where to look for the proper tool, for the proper piece of code that you need for building that particular program. And this is my focus in this course. I want to make you independent. I'm not just teaching you the code. My focus is not to just teach you code, but to make you a master of Python, so that you understand what Python is, how it works, and where to look for the code when you need it. And I already showed you two functions where we type the object type using the dir function and you get all the available methods, and I also showed you how to get all the available functions as well using that code. But later I'm also going to show you how to use the Python documentation, the official Python documentation, so you can find every kind of code that you need to use for your programs. And so almost any program has the same logic. And you need to know basically 4 things. If you master these 4 things, then you can build almost any program. And these are: first, you need to know to use the correct objects, the correct Python objects to use in Python to model the real-world objects. So you need to know some objects, such as float here and int. Then you need to know the methods and the functions which can be used to do things with these objects. So we talked about these 2. Third is to know how to create new objects when there are no available objects in Python. Because in our example, we just use numbers, and of course the Python developers would have designed object types to represent numbers in Python. So we saw the example of float and int, but there are many types of objects, any kind of object you can think of in the real world. Maybe you are working with videos or pictures, and Python cannot have every kind of object that you need. So in such cases, you have to know how to design new types of objects. Maybe you want to design a photo object or a video object that has methods such as play the video, or the photo object has methods such as grayscale or make it transparent. So you too can be a sort of developer of Python, since you are able to design new objects in Python, and I'll show you how to do just that later in the course. And then fourth is make your program intelligent by writing conditional statements. So in other words, to enable your program to take decision making. Such as here currently in our program, we have 2 formulas for different cases, for different scenarios, the northern hemisphere of the Earth and the southern hemisphere. And now we have to instruct the program to behave differently based on different scenarios. So let's do just that. So this is a case to add 180 to the longitude, and we also had the other case where we wanted to subtract 180 from the longitude. In order to design this, we need to ask ourselves the question of when would we use this and when would we use that? Well, we would add 180 when the longitude value is negative, and we would subtract 180 when the longitude is positive. We can do that using a conditional statement, and it starts with the if Python keyword, and that is followed by the condition we want to check. The condition we want to check is if longitude is less. Do we have a less method there? For float, let's check. So go to L __ RLE. So let's see help float __ LE __. So yes, this seems to be what we need. So it compares if self, so if self is the first object to the left of the method, LE, so we want to compare that to, so if longitude is less than, well, we want to check if it's negative, so if it's less than 0, it makes sense. So we have another object, 0, I will assign it a type of float. 0 is the attribute of the object, close the parenthesis, so that is the object. And if longitude is less than 0, then something down here will happen. You need to use a colon there. Always after an if statement, you need to use a colon. So after this will happen. And then, if that is not the case, this here will happen. So we have an else statement here, followed by a colon. This is more or less a conditional block, so the program now will make a decision based on the value of longitude, or more specifically, based on this condition, so the condition of longitude being less than 0. Now, if I execute this, you'll see something. We get an error. Indentation error. Expected an indented block. In this line, antipode longitude. Indented. So, let me try to indent. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'll execute again. We got another error. Let me keep the assistant here. I don't need the assistant is just for you on your own computer if you want more information about the error, but this is the actual error you get from Python. The assistant is an additional information you get from Thony, the IDE we are using to write and run Python programs. So again, this time it says antipode latitude in the sub, so it's about this line now. It says indentation error, so we still have to indent. So let me try again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Execute. And this time it seems to be working. So we got the output. And this is the correct way to write an indentation block. So after the colon you need to indent. You can also indent just one space. But it has to be consistent. If you indented one space here, you have to indent one space in here too, and it will work just the same. So it can be one space, 2, 3, but 4 is what it is recommended. Basically every Python programmer will use 4 spaces, so please use 4 spaces, because it makes the code more readable. So indentation is a way to tell that this part of the code here is a child, so to say, of this code, or is dependent on this code here. And you'll see other scenarios there that we use a colon, and after the colon follows the indentation. Now, if we remove the minus and try with a plus 3.47, we'll get a different result. So minus 176. And that is how you make your program take decisions. So you write the condition, you do something if that is true. If that is not true, then this will happen. So Python goes like this. Let's say the value is 3.47. Python executes this line, so it registers the object, this object, into memory, and it assigns the identifier latitude to that object. So whenever you call that identifier, that object is actually called here. So this line is executed, and then we go here, and Python checks if that value is less than 0, less or equal to 0, even if it was equal, because you saw that this la method also includes equality. So if that is the case, Python will register the value of longitude plus 180 to this identifier, and it will ignore the next else statement. Instead, it will go to execute whatever goes after the else statement, which is these two print functions. Now, what happens if we put a value of 0 here? We would get 180 as output. So Python actually executed this line, since this LE also includes equality. If you want only less and not equality, you'd have to use LT, because if you go here and check the methods of floats, you will see LT as well. And that is as you see, less, not less or equal. Actually, talking geographically, a longitude of 0, so the antipode longitude for 0, would have basically two values, minus 180 and also 180, because there, that meridian is where both these longitudes actually met each other. So best thing we could do here is to use LT. So in that case, if that was 0, that means the longitude is not less than 0. So this condition would not be true and this would not be executed. Therefore, this would be executed, since this is not true. But we can add more conditions here using an elif statement, which is like the if statement, but it allows us to just write more conditions. So in this case, we would check if longitude equal. So we have another method for floats, which is in here, equal. If it's equal with float 0, again a colon, and after that, what you want to execute in that case. Do you want to add 180 or subtract 180? So if we had the special case of a longitude of 0, then it would probably be in your own arbitrary decision whether you want to assign a value of 180 or minus 180 to the longitude, to the antipode longitude. I would assign a value of 180 and things would work the same. So we get 180 because this was executed. So if I add a 0 here just to show you the difference in the output, so this is what we get. You could also add more conditionals like that. Let's say you want to show a message if the user entered an invalid longitude, such as 220, for example. That doesn't exist. So what we could do is we could use the greater, the GT method, to check. So the GT method works like this, self. So if self is greater than its other object, which would be the float 180, don't forget the colon. In that case, we could assign to antipode longitude maybe a string, which is another data type, another object type in Python. It is to represent text, let's say like that. So you can see that this object has the same structure as this one here, but this is to abstract text in Python, and this is to abstract decimal numbers. So if we run that, you would see that for longitude, for the antipode longitude, we would get this text. And so here you have a conditional block that checks different scenarios for your program. I hope it was understandable, and ask questions if not. Thanks.